You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.
On the Dan Nicholl Show this week, a guest who the last time I saw him, when we were still on television, arrived and in our green room made his way through a salad no dressing, a cup of brown rice, and to really let himself go not one but two shots of lightly flavoured sparkling water. Now he is retired and arrived in studio, 3 sausage rolls, a couple of black label quarts, and a look of intent in the eyes, because he is recently retired after an incredible cycling career where he did both his team and South Africa enormously proud over many years across many races right around the world. And so an extremely warm welcome and a congratulations on the descent into middle age, Ryan Gibbons.
Thank you very much, Dan. I really do appreciate it. I thought I was hiding those extra 6 kilograms.
Oh, no, you're looking very chubby.
Well, thanks for the honesty, but I feel it.
Retirement, has it sunk in yet?
It hasn't. It really hasn't. You know, we're still in the season of 2025, and you know, I'm still getting a salary until the end of this year, so it's still quite fresh. But I think kind of from when January rolls on and I'm not under pressure to do 20 to 30 to 40 hours a week and I've got all this time in my hands, I think that's when it's going to be a bit of a rude awakening.
It's a massive decision for any professional athlete to make, and the only thing I always wish for an athlete is they get to make the decision on their own terms. All too many don't, and injury kicks in or form finally leaves them and they don't get to say goodbye the way they wanted. I get the sense that you had decided the time is right, it's on your own terms, and you're saying goodbye the way you wanted to.
100%. I've had so many ex-colleagues and friends who've, you know, they get too old or they're just not good enough anymore, and you know, they're scraping the bottom and you know, they're desperate, they're begging for a contract here and there. I was at that point where, you know, I've done what I set out to achieve. Of course, I think any athlete wants to do more, but I was content, and I realized that there was more to life than just my professional sport, and I was able to end it on my terms, you know, at the time where I'm still in love with the sport. You know, a lot of people start to resent what they do, so I kind of made my peace with the fact that I'm going to bow out when I want and how I want, and yeah, grateful that I was in that position to do that.
It's a weird world you move into, though, because from pretty much being a teenager, sitting on a bicycle and having a very boring life was what most of the last 2 decades have been. Your mates are all out drinking into the small hours and visiting fast food joints at 4 a.m. and doing the kind of things people in their late teens, early 20s should be doing on a Tuesday. And instead, you're living on protein powder and dreams. And now, all of a sudden, you've shifted into a world that everybody else has been part of for 15, 20 years.
You're right. It is a huge adjustment. I think, you know, as a professional cyclist, well, professional athlete in general, but more so as a professional cyclist, you know, your whole day is scheduled and planned. You know exactly what you're doing tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next month. You've got coaches, you've got dietitians, you've got nutritionists, chefs preparing you meals. So everything is kind of planned out for you. And yeah, you're constantly scrutinized based on your weight and your ability and your appearance. So now that that's all kind of gone out the window, I feel like I'm a teenager. So I'm trying to get in all those garage pies and all those castle lights, you know, make up for lost time.
You were the oldest person at Matric Rage this year. You seem to have a great time. I'm not sure your wife was so happy with you being down there, but you've got that one out of your system. And you are now getting to live a slightly more normal life, because what you have to do to be a professional cyclist at your level is not normal as the rest of the world knows it. And it started at a very young age. Go back to those teenage years and starting to understand that, yes, I am very good at riding a bicycle and doing so extremely quickly, but if I want to translate this into I'm pretty good in South Africa to I'm very good around the world, this is what I am now going to have to do.
100%. You know, while I was at school, I was doing all the school sports. I played a bit of rugby, played a bit of cricket, played a bit of hockey, you know, not very well, but that's what I did. On the sideline, you know, I was taking part in cycling events on the weekends and still kind of training here and there. And it got to that point where I realized I'm not too bad at this. Let's give it a shot. And what does that mean? What does that take? And exactly as you mentioned, you know, it's a lot of sacrifice. It was all school sports had to take a back seat. My studies had to take a little bit of a back seat, and it was a very regimented kind of mundane life. It was exciting in that, you know, I traveled a lot and I raced a lot and I got to do pretty cool things, as a youngster, even at school. But when my mates were going for parties on Fridays and Saturdays, I couldn't because I was racing on a Saturday or Sunday morning. And it was, it did happen organically. I never had pressure from my parents. They always supported me and said, just do it as long as you can or as long as you want to. And here we are 15 odd years later, and I've made a career out of it. So yeah, looking back, I don't regret it, but it was a very unique kind of childhood and high school to early 20s experience.
No, are you happy, given what it subsequently gave you, that was the right choice that you made, and that was the path that Ryan Gibbons needed to take?
Also, very good question. I mean, I think I'm a person, I tend to overthink a lot. I also always have FOMO, so I think to myself, maybe I should have done something else, or maybe I should have done this, but done this differently. I have no regrets, to be dead honest with you. I have had a phenomenal career, and my life experience is something that most can only dream of. I've got to travel the world. I've got to live in different European cities. I've met some amazing people, not just in the cycling sphere and realm, some of the top sportsmen of all times. So I don't regret it, but now it's kind of like I don't have job experience. The real world is actually quite scary. The other day, for example, I went to take my car in for a service. I'm in my 30s, and it was the first time I've ever done that. And something that seemed so mundane and so normal, that was like I was nervous.
So that first time you had a car service, or first time driving a car, given you've been on a bicycle for 20 years.
Exactly that. So that was also just as daunting as it was getting the car service.
Getting through to that kind of first breakthrough moment, I think probably would have been, yep, okay, this justifies what I've been through. If you'd worked like that through your teenage and 20 years, and then injury ends the career, or you don't get signed, and you then have to go and be an accountant or a plumber or whatever you end up doing, maybe the sense of reward isn't quite so great. But having that first big event, signing that first big contract, I think probably would have shifted the scale significantly. What was that moment? What was that first race, that first acknowledgement that said, you know what, Ryan, everything you've done for the last 5-10 years, this is why?
I think that the first moments I had that, which was kind of like, okay, the sacrifice, this commitment, this dedication is worth it, was actually while I was still racing in South Africa. I just turned 20. I'd been racing on the local scene, and as a junior, I'd been winning a lot, but I'd never won an elite race, racing in that open category that's for all the aspiring professionals. That was in 2015, early 2015. I won the first race of the season in Midvaal, Johannesburg, called the Fast One. And, at that point, it was just as good as winning the Tour de France. I thought, I am the man, I'm good enough, everything I've done, it's worth it, and I won my 5,000 Rand, and I thought, cool, that's me sorted. Then a few years later, I kind of continued with that. I went through some academies, under 23 development programs with Dimension Data, or MTN Quebec, then Dimension Data, and I did the under 23 Giro d'Italia. And I won the Sprinters jersey, and literally 2 days later, Douglas Ryder gave me a call, and he said, you're on our team next year. And that moment that was it.
Oh, I get goosebumps just hearing you recall that. That's a huge jump up in a pretty short space of time. Were you one of those guys who's just rammed with self-belief and, yep, this is exactly where I need to be? Or was there a sense of, sure, am I ready for this? Am I good enough to deliver on the vote of faith that Douglas Ryder and many others appear to have in me?
When I look back at it now, I think to myself, wow, I was really naive and a bit ignorant and maybe a little bit arrogant, where in that moment, there was no question in my mind. It was, I was going to be a professional, whether I signed that contract now or in a year or in 5 years. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't think about the repercussions of not being a professional. I was just so sure of myself that it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. Now I'm looking at it thinking, what was I doing? That was very, very ambitious, very, very naive, but my stars aligned and it worked out.
When we have rugby players on the show, they often talk about that first Springbok camp they went to, and suddenly as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, you're surrounded by guys who you've been watching on TV for the last decade, and the posters are up in the bedroom. What were some of those moments for you joining the full team, lining up at some of these big races, where on the outside you're trying to be as cool as you can, and inside you go, oh my God, I can't believe that is...
I had that exact moment. It was at a training camp, a pre-season training camp, actually in Cape Town, where the whole of the Dimension Data team was there. And a big rider named Mark Cavendish, one of the best riders in the sport, best sprinter of all time. And I remember meeting him, and when I was young, maybe 10 years prior to that, or even less, I looked up to this guy winning stages of the Tour de France, thinking, oh my gosh, this is the man. And, one day I'd like to meet him. And there I am, however many years later, at a training camp, not only meeting my idol and my hero, but I'm going to be teammates with him. And then getting my race calendar and finding out that I'm doing a lot of races with this guy. And like you say, it was, in the moment you just, this is normal. And, you're a bit scared to make eye contact with the guy. but again, in that moment, it was like, oh my word, this is my life.
And I think that's probably got two things. One, there is all right, well, this is scaring the living daylights out of me because it's a very vivid reminder of where people think you are. But it's also telling you that, right, well, I've made a really important step in this journey that I have to be committed to because this is what I have set out to be. This is who I've set out to deliver on.
Exactly. It gave me that reassurance that, you're here for a reason. And you thought you were going to be the world's best because you won a race in the south of Johannesburg a few years prior, but now you're here. So it gives a lot of pressure, but at the same time, that reassurance and that belief, but also that motivation. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want them to be like, oh, what did we do? We made an error in signing you. So combination of things, but it definitely, gives you that sense of belonging and that drive to, okay, you're here now, make it count.
So you met Cav, you're in the squad, you're a bit of a big deal now, you're on a paycheck that translates nicely into rand, things are starting to fall into place. What's it like when you then meet the big races for the first time and suddenly you are lining up at one of these iconic cycling competitions that, again, as a kid you've been watching thinking, gee, imagine one day?
Again, if I look back at it, I think I should have absorbed it more and I should have, enjoyed the experience. But in the moment, I was just, everything happened so quickly. I signed professional. The team gave me a provisional calendar that was subject to change based on performances or bad performances, whatever it may be. And kind of a week before Paris-Roubaix, which is one of the biggest one-day races in the calendar. It's the race with cobblestones, the Hell of the North, horrible event, but also the most iconic. And they said, listen, you're going to do this in just shy of 10 days. And I thought, oh my word, like this is happening. And then it came and it passed. And, looking back, I'm like, wow, I didn't actually get to absorb every single moment. And of course you can't, but it's easy now to look back and say you should have just looked at every human that was on the sideline. There's thousands and thousands of spectators, and you're just in the moment, it's just a blur. And then just after that race, they said, okay, that went all right. Now you're going to do Giro d'Italia, which is a grand tour, which is also unheard of for first-year professionals to do. And again, it gave me that reassurance that, okay, you're here for a reason. The team sees something in you. But, in that race, your nerves are through the roof. You just feel so overwhelmed. But my biggest driving force or factor or thing that kind of motivated me was I don't want to let my team down and I don't want to embarrass myself. Maybe not the right motivator, but that's what motivated me and it worked.
If it works, it works. There are several reasons probably which suggest why I never became a professional cyclist myself, but one of them, to speak to your slight tinge of regret on that Paris-Roubaix debut, is I would have been the guy on the bike with his phone out taking selfies and filming and making videos and generally causing chaos. You were far more professional, of course, and then delivered as we all expected you to do, and delivered in what is as demanding a cauldron as sport has. And when we watch from the outside and we see you guys mount an attack, or you're climbing endlessly, or you're hurtling down at 70, 80 kilometers an hour and more on these treacherous descents, it is a level of human exertion that very few of us will ever come close to touching. Is there a sense when you're in that space that you are almost outside of the body, that something else is happening and you kind of have to transcend what must be a huge amount of pain and suffering to get through it at that level?
It is exactly that. I can recall so many moments where I was just in a world of hurt and I thought to myself, why am I doing this? How am I doing this? But when you're in that moment, you've got such an amazing support structure around you, whether it be friends and family, you've got a team around you, you're looking at, you're riding side by side with some of the world's best athletes, people who are loved and adored by thousands and millions. It is surreal. You are almost kind of out of body experience. And I know that sounds quite cliche, but some of my biggest and best successes and achievements, I can't actually tell you what happened, or I can't tell you why did I make that decision. Just something took over and I was in it. And reflecting back, I can think, wow, why did I do that? Or that was so cool. But in that moment, a lot of it is just a blur.
The peloton that you form part of, not just your own team, the whole race. From the outside is generally a blur for us. It's this collection of multicoloured Lycra-clad athletes hurtling through a stage. What is the camaraderie or lack thereof like there? How intense is it? I think of sort of water polo where so much goes on under the water that we don't see. Is there a lot more attrition? Is there a lot more feisty competitiveness than we perhaps see on television?
There's a lot more than meets the eye. I think cycling has also changed a lot in the last few years. Back in the day, there was always that, you had that mutual respect. It's that we are competitors, we are trying to beat each other, but we all have sacrificed our lives. We're all doing this, which is life-threatening. It is an extreme sport to a certain degree. So, of course, I want to beat you, but at the same time, I respect you. I know you're here for a reason. If you're better than me, it's because if you win, you deserve it. It has changed in the last few years where it's a lot more competitive. The peloton is also getting a lot younger. There's a lot that goes on that people don't see. There's just in terms of the physical aspect, there's always an elbow here or a headbutt here or someone throws something at you, which doesn't seem like a big deal. It's not like someone's tackling you on a rugby field. But when you're going 70 k's an hour down a mountain, and if someone does something to throw you off, you could die. So there's a lot more of physicality than people realize, and also the emotional trauma that I've experienced in the peloton. Things that people have said about me and my mother, and there's a lot of that goes on.
So proper sledging while you're cycling.
100%, and like threats and things like that. It's part of any sport, and I think a lot of sports when there's static cameras and there's microphones everywhere, you have to be quite diplomatic, and you can't do these things. But on a bike, unless the camera catches you doing something, it didn't happen. So a lot happens that people don't realize.
Is that one of those things that stays in the peloton, or are you squaring up in the hotel car park like the evening?
It has changed in later years because everyone has got a camera behind them or a cell phone or an Instagram reel. So it has quietened down, but in my early years, I did see a few fights in the elevator of the hotel lobby.
All right, we won't ask you about any you were involved with. I'm sure that would never have happened. It seems that it's been quite a relatively quick change because you're not an old man. You are at the end of your career, but it's not over a massive spread of time. By and large, has cycling changed for the better or for the worse in that decade or so?
I think cycling is a lot more exciting to watch nowadays. Back in the day, there'd be the big races, the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, the one-day classics, where everyone was super motivated for, and it was going to be the highest level. Now, because it's so competitive, and you have so many more young and upcoming aspiring cyclists, everyone has to be on their A game at all times. So the level has definitely gone through the roof. There's no such thing as an easy race anymore. People used to go to the Tour Down Under in January or go to Tour of California in May, and it used to be a holiday. There'd be 1 or 2 hard days, but guys were having beers at night and things like that. That has definitely changed. So I think from a spectator point of view, it's better. But in terms of the longevity of cyclists, it's becoming a lot more sacrifice, a lot more discipline. Back in the day, there used to be maybe 1 training camp a year, and you do 80 to 100 race days. Nowadays, you're doing 4 or 5 training camps a year. So this is a lot of time away from home. I mean, last year, for example, I was away for 3 weeks in December, home for a week, 3 weeks in January, home for 8 days, straight to a race, straight from there to a training camp, straight from there to another race, and then the block of classics. So I was home for about 7 days from January to middle of April. And that's why I think it is becoming a lot more taxing, and especially as you get a little bit older, you have family, you have a wife, you have kids, is the juice worth the squeeze anymore? And that's why I think, the sport is at its highest level it's ever been. It's super competitive, it's exciting to watch, but I do think that the careers are going to get shorter and it's not sustainable.
I'm not sure that's the only sport that is having similar questions asked of it. You have a perspective now as a very recently retired cyclist that allows you to, I think, not just have a really good view of things, but also perhaps be a little more open in your assessment. Cycling went through, and I use the past term deliberately, went through a period where most people watched it with a bit of a shake of the head. Well, if they've won, then there's clearly something going into their diet that's probably not supposed to be there. Do you feel, by and large, that cycling is a largely clean sport at the moment? Is it possible as a professional cyclist to get round the barriers and the hurdles and to engage in some of the practices that shouldn't really be there?
I'd like to believe that it is. I mean, I think I kind of became a professional in the era just after it had been quite dark and quite tainted. We are under such rigorous testing protocols. I'm not a big name rider. I haven't won the Tour de France, and yet I can get tested anywhere between 30 to 80 times a year. That's blood and urine. I'm on a whereabouts program where every single day I've got to, even now that I'm retired, I still have to do it for the next 6 months, log into an app and say, what address am I staying at for the night? And I've got to give 1 hour's time slot where I'm going to be at that location. So, they can come randomly and you can't turn them away. If you say, no, don't test me, then that's immediately, a strike through your name. So I'd like to believe that it's almost impossible for people to get away with it. If they are getting away, if they are doing things, it must be at a very, very high level. No one can do this alone. But yeah, maybe I'm a little bit naive, but I'd like to believe that it is impossible to do something and get away with it nowadays.
So I'm thinking in 2026 of possibly doing my first triathlon. Hypothetically speaking, would you be able to point me in the direction of the person who would assist me in these particular spaces?
That's another, a lot of people who know that I'm a cyclist and obviously know the sport's past just assume that, of course, I know some doctors and, of course...
Sure. Phone Jerome, here he is.
Exactly. Where I, again, maybe I'm just naive or maybe I've been fortunate enough to be in clean environments and clean teams, but I wouldn't even know where to look. So, yeah, you probably have better like going to the gym next door than asking me.
Definitely. I know which part of Joburg we're in. All right. So you are still being monitored. You're still being checked. You're still technically a professional athlete, although effectively retirement has kicked in. I do believe, though, and this is talking to your elderly golf-obsessed father-in-law, that you still are going to have to do an awful lot of cycling, not because you necessarily want to, but because you are a large-hearted gentleman, not just by virtue of being a very generous sort, but because all of the cycling you've done has actually enlarged your heart, and for health reasons, you're going to have to keep cycling just to slowly bring that back down to something approaching normality.
It's such a scary thing and something I also didn't realize. In my mind, I always said, the day I retire is the day I'm going to go to Micah, buy some hooks, and I'm going to rack that bike, and that's where it's going to stand. But doctors have advised, and they said, we do yearly ECGs and EKGs and things like that. And as an endurance athlete, your heart does grow and does expand. So they say, if you all of a sudden just stop, and you stop that cardiovascular exercise and even doing some mild endurance, it's actually quite dangerous, and you have that risk of getting a heart attack. So everyone has recommended that you detrain. And every 6 months for the next 2 years, I'm going to have to go for an ECG. And they say to kind of slowly start knocking off the miles bit by bit. But to stop abruptly would be potentially, life-threatening. So as much as I don't want to sometimes, I'm still getting out on the bike. And of course, I still love the sport and I have a passion for it. But for a big part of it is because I don't want to all of a sudden have a heart attack.
I remember when Dave Rundle, the Western Province off-spinning all-rounder, brought his cricket career to an end. He had a braai at his house and built a bonfire and burnt every single piece of his cricket kit. He had had enough of the sport. You clearly haven't. What beyond just ensuring your good health and an affection for what has been such a huge part of who you are for so many years sits on the horizon from a cycling perspective? Are we seeing you as a Tour de France captain? Are we seeing you riding veterans races? What part will cycling play in your life going forward?
Cycling has been my whole life. It is my identity. It's brought me so everything I have is from cycling. My best mates are cyclists. So I don't think I can just stop. As much as I convinced myself I would, I still have a passion for the sport. I'm still going to get out there on my bike and ride with mates. I do have a bit of a competitive itch that I'll need to scratch here and there. The sacrifices and the dedication and the demands of being a pro cyclist are very different to racing your bike on the local scene here. So there is a chance, I might kind of mid-January say to myself, there's a race this weekend, let me go and do it. And I know myself as well, I'm going to get there and say, I'm unfit and I've had my garage pies and my black label courts that don't put pressure on yourself, but I will. So I definitely do see myself, racing a little bit on the local scene, getting involved in the community, but also giving back. I think I want to show the youngsters and the upcoming generation that it is possible. I started riding a bike at the mountain bike school series when I was 14 years old, and just under 20 years later, I'm here after doing multiple Olympics, Tour de France's, making a career out of it. So I want to try and inspire the youth and kind of guide them where I can to show them it is possible to make it.
One of the places we've seen a lot of reasonably recently retired top cyclists pop up is Absa Cape Epic and more recently Nedbank Gravel Burn. Are these the kind of spaces that might have some appeal?
100%. I mean, these are not road events, but still, as a cyclist, doing the Cape Epic is on everyone's bucket list. This new gravel burn looked phenomenal, and I've only heard positive things about it. I definitely would like to do those in the near future and tick that off, but definitely not in the competitive category.
They are events that bring lots of people together. The Epic in particular, you have a teammate. If you had to choose from your cycling team the perfect cycling teammate who combines both a little ability with also a great deal of fun to be around, who might that be?
It would actually be a fellow South African. His name is Kent Main. He never quite made it on the world stage. He was thereabouts. He rode for the Dimension Data development team. But he's one of my best mates. He is super talented, a lot more talented than I am, I think, when it comes to raw talent. But of course, I'd never say that to his face. He also loves a beer. So, I can guarantee that if I race with him, I'd scratch that competition itch, and that competitiveness would come to the forefront. We'd have a lot of fun, and we'd definitely have a few beers as well.
I look forward to watching that unfold. And I'm sure we will see you in a number of these events because there's very clearly a competitive cyclist in there, the retirement notwithstanding. But those will be memories you'll add to this already incredible collection. A really difficult one to answer, but as you look back over this cycling career, riding with some of the modern greats, riding in the great cycling events of the world, is there a particular race, a particular day on a race, a particular moment where you look back and you think, yep, you know what, Ryan Gibbons, every Friday night party I missed out on, every pie in a garage I couldn't eat, the fact I didn't have a girlfriend till I was 28, all of this has been completely worth it because of that particular moment?
There definitely was. There definitely was. In my first few years as a professional, I think I was more successful than I was in my latter years. I won some big races. In my first year as a professional, I won the Tour de Langkawi, which is seen as the Tour of the Future. So that was a really special moment. But one moment where, again, I can run it back and I can tell you exactly every second of that day was the Queen stage of the Vuelta a España in 2021. I was racing for UAE Team Emirates, the biggest and best team in the world. It was a mountain stage, the Queen stage being the hardest stage. I'm not a climber. That day for me should have been one of the days where I'm just in the gruppetto in the back with all my fellow colleagues who are the same stature and size as me, and we're just getting through the day. I happened to find myself in the breakaway, and I don't know how that happened. And next thing I knew, I happened to be by myself ahead of the race. I didn't end up winning the stage. The front favourites, so the guy who ended up winning the race, they caught me in the last 2Ks. But on the hardest stage of that Grand Tour, one of the biggest races in the world, I could have won a mountain day. And that shouldn't happen to a rider like me. It didn't happen to a rider like me, but that moment I looked back and the amount of applause and cheers and positive, uplifting kind of comments I got from that was kind of the day I'll never forget. And that was, definitely worth only getting a girlfriend at 28.
I love that memory, and I love the fact that it speaks more broadly to your ability now as the bicycle doesn't get hung up but gets set aside a little more often. You can look back on what has clearly been a hugely, hugely fulfilling career in cycling.
Thank you. And it has, and it still is sinking in. I think every day it will become more of a reality, but I definitely can look back and say, of course, every athlete, as I mentioned earlier, wants to achieve more and looks back and feels like they could have done things differently to get that. But I can look back and say, you know what, the biggest events, the races that everyone wants to do, I did. I can pat myself on the back and say, you know what, that was cool, and I did. Ryan Gibbons from Johannesburg, South Africa, did that.
There are so many occasions of athletes we have on the show who have spent time around the world, and I often take the opportunity to remind them that I don't think you always realise just how much of an impact you had on us, that while you were almost winning a Queen stage, or you're signing for UAE Emirates, or you are taking part as this youngster in a Paris-Roubaix, there are so many South Africans, not just back home, but all over the world, because we do spread everywhere, going, hey, there's a South African, and how proud we are of you. So congratulations on a wonderful career on and off the bike. There is a lot more to come, but you really have done us proud. It's been a wonderful, wonderful, proudly South African cycling career, and you can be enormously, enormously happy with what you've delivered.
Oh, I really do appreciate that. Very humbling, but thank you. Thank you.
All right. Now, I know that you are back now in South Africa, so it's the chance for the first time to meet your wife and your 17-year-old child. So we wish you the best of luck with that. Possibly see you at the Epic or at the Burn, but I think more likely maybe on a golf course with a couple of beers and taste this wonderful career of yours.
Definitely, I'll see you there, and I'll definitely cheers to you.
There we go. Ryan Gibbons, one of the modern greats of South African cycling, rode all over the world, rode the biggest races with the biggest names, and was not only certainly not out of place, but sat right up there with the very best of them, and now calling time on a most memorable career. Look out for him at your local cycling event. He'll be the guy way in the front, still looking far too competitive, but when you do catch up with him, buy him a beer and congratulate him, because, gee, it's been a great career. My guest on the Dan Nicholl Show this week, Ryan Gibbons.
You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.